There is something deeply beautiful about aging that we often fail to understand when we are young. When we are 20, we think strength is in muscles. When we are 40, we think strength is in money and success. But when we reach 70, we slowly realize true strength is simply still being able to live with awareness, gratitude, and grace. Let me share something with you today, not as a lecture, but as a reflection from life itself. There was once an old man I met during a visit to a retirement home. His name was Mr. Sharma, 72 years old, bent slightly in posture, but his eyes were alive. I asked him, Uncle, how do you feel at this age? He smiled and said something I will never forget. Son, I don't count my age in years anymore. I count it in blessings I can still experience. That is when I realized some bodies at 70 are declining, but some are quietly extraordinary. And today, let us reflect on 5 signs. If even 2 of these exist in your life at 70, your body is not just surviving, it is honoring you back. Section 1. You wake up without heavy dependence on others. At the age of 70, one of the quietest but most powerful signs of an extraordinary body is the simple ability to wake up each morning and still participate in your own life with a sense of independence. Not complete independence in the youthful sense of running fast, lifting heavy, or working endlessly, but the gentle independence of being able to begin your day without total reliance on someone else. I once met an elderly woman in Jaipur during a visit to a community home. She was 73 years old, living alone after her husband had passed away and her children had moved abroad. When I entered her small home, I expected to see sadness or emptiness. Instead, I saw rhythm. She woke up slowly at dawn, folded her bedding neatly, and sat on her simple wooden chair for a few minutes before even touching her tea. There was no hurry, no panic, no frustration, just acceptance of her pace. I asked her softly, Do you ever feel alone? She smiled and said, I am alone, but I am not helpless. That distinction is everything. She explained how she prepares her own tea, waters her plants, cleans her veranda, and plans small tasks for the day. Nothing grand, nothing overwhelming, but everything done by her own hands in her own time. She told me something I still remember clearly. As long as I can take care of my morning, I still have dignity. That word dignity is deeply connected to independence at this age. When a person loses the ability to do even small things for themselves, life can sometimes begin to feel like it is happening to them instead of with them. But when a person can still participate in their own routine, even in the smallest ways, life continues to feel collaborative. I also remember meeting an elderly man in a small town in Gujarat who had limited mobility but insisted on brushing his own teeth, slowly walking to his chair and feeding himself. His son once offered to do everything for him, out of love, but the father gently refused. He said, If I stop doing small things, I will start forgetting who I am. That statement reveals something profound. Independence is not just physical, it is psychological continuity. At 70, waking up and still being able to engage with life, even minimally, creates a sense of self respect. It tells the mind, I am still capable. And that message is deeply healing. It is not about comparing with younger years, it is about honoring the present capacity. Because extraordinary aging is not measured by how much you can do, but by how much of your life still feels like yours. So, if at 70 you can wake up, take care of yourself, and begin your day with even partial independence, understand this deeply. Your body is not just functioning, it is still respecting your spirit. And that is extraordinary. Section 2. You still find joy in small things. One of the most beautiful transformations that can happen at the age of 70 is the ability to find happiness in things that once seemed ordinary or even invisible. When we are young, joy is often loud. It comes from achievements, celebrations, travel, possessions, and milestones. But as life matures, joy becomes quieter. It begins to hide inside small, almost unnoticed moments. I once met a retired school teacher in Rishikesh who had developed a daily ritual. Every morning she would sit by the riverbank and simply watch the Ganga flow. She did not carry a phone, a book, or even a purpose for being there. She just sat. When I asked her what she was doing, she said something that stayed with me deeply. I am learning how to be happy without needing anything to happen. That is a different kind of happiness altogether. She explained that earlier in her life, happiness was always linked to events, her children's success, festivals, travel plans, social gatherings. But now, at 72, she found joy in simpler things: the sound of water, the warmth of sunlight, the presence of wind. She said, "Life has slowed down, but my ability to feel has become sharper." That is the paradox of aging gracefully. The world may reduce its noise, but awareness increases. I also remember a man in a village near Punjab who would sit every evening on a small wooden bench outside his house. He would watch birds return to the trees. He told me, "Every evening I feel like I am watching a free concert of nature." He smiled and added, "And I never miss a single show." There was also an elderly couple I met who had a beautiful habit. Every evening they would sit together and share one small thing that made them happy that day. Sometimes it was as simple as the tea was strong today or a child smiled at me in the market. It may sound small, but it is deeply transformative. Because joy does not always depend on size, it depends on attention. At 70, if a person still notices small pleasures, it means their heart has not become numb. It is still responsive, still awake, still connected to life. Many people assume aging is about loss, but in truth, it can also be about refinement. You begin to lose unnecessary desires and begin to recognize essential joys. A bird on a wire becomes enough. A warm meal becomes enough. A quiet morning becomes enough. And when enough becomes enough, suffering reduces. So if at 70 you still smile at small things, still feel touched by simple moments, still find peace in ordinary life, understand this: your joy has not diminished, it has deepened. And that is extraordinary. Section 3. You can walk and move without constant fear. At the age of 70, movement becomes more than physical activity, it becomes emotional freedom. The ability to walk, stand, or simply move without being dominated by fear is one of the clearest signs that the body and mind are still working in harmony. I once met a retired army officer in Punjab who had served his country for decades. Age had brought stiffness to his knees and slower steps, but it had not brought fear into his movement. Every morning he would walk slowly in his small garden with a wooden stick in his hand. He was careful, yes, but not fearful. I asked him, "Do you ever worry about falling?" He paused for a moment and said, "I don't think about falling, I think about walking." That shift in focus is everything. He explained that fear makes the body smaller. It tightens muscles, restricts movement, and slowly convinces a person to stop trying. But confidence, even in small doses, keeps life flowing. There was also an elderly woman I met in Maharashtra who had experienced a fall a few years earlier. After that incident, she became extremely afraid of walking alone. But one day, she decided to begin again slowly. She started by walking just 5 steps in her courtyard, then 10, then a small circle. Eventually, she regained enough confidence to walk to her garden every morning. She told me, "I am not trying to walk like before. I am just trying not to stop living." That is courage at 70. Fear often grows silently in old age, not from reality, but from memory. One bad experience can create hesitation that expands beyond its true size. But when a person chooses to move again, even slowly, they reclaim their life from fear. Movement is not just about mobility, it is about mindset. At 70, if a person can still move without being mentally imprisoned by fear of pain, injury, or weakness, their body is still cooperating with life instead of resisting it. I once met a man in Kerala who would walk to a nearby temple every evening, even though it took him longer each day. When asked why he didn't use help or reduce the journey, he said, "If I stop walking today, I will stop tomorrow. I don't want my life to start shrinking without me noticing." That awareness is powerful because life does not suddenly become small, it becomes small gradually when fear is allowed to grow unchecked. So, if at 70 you can still walk, move, and participate in life without being ruled by constant fear, understand this: your body is not just aging, it is still trusting you. And that trust is extraordinary. Section 4. Remembering gratitude more than grievances. At the age of 70, the mind becomes a library of memories. But what defines peace is which books you choose to open again and again. I once met an elderly man in Mumbai sitting quietly on a bench near a hospital. His face carried wrinkles, but his expression carried something deeper: acceptance. I asked him, "Do you often think about your past?" He smiled softly and said, "I do, but I choose carefully." That sentence stayed with me. Because at this stage of life, memory is not just recall, it is selection. We either relive pain or we relive gratitude. He told me he had lost his wife 5 years ago. The grief was real, but he said something profound. If I only remember what I lost, I die every day. But if I remember what I was given, I live again. This is emotional wisdom that rarely comes in youth. At 70, the heart slowly learns that holding on to grievances is like carrying stones in a bag you no longer need to carry. The weight does not change the past, it only weakens the present. I also met a retired school teacher in Delhi who kept a small notebook. In it, she wrote only one thing every day, something she was grateful for. Some days it was as simple as the sun was warm today. Other days it was a neighbor smiled at me. She told me I cannot control my body as much anymore, but I can still control what I remember. That is power not over others, but over one's own inner world. At 70, gratitude becomes a form of healing. The body may carry pain, but the mind does not need to multiply it. Instead, it can soften it with remembrance of good moments: a child's laughter, a shared meal, a journey once taken, a hand once held. There was also a retired couple I met in Kerala who had a beautiful habit. Every night before sleeping, they would ask each other one question: "What made you smile today?" Even on difficult days, they tried to find one answer. This practice slowly transforms the mind. It shifts focus from loss to life still happening. Gratitude is not denial of suffering. It is the decision not to let suffering become the only story. At this age, if a person can still remember more blessings than burdens, their mind is not deteriorating, it is refining itself. Like gold being purified, only the essence remains, and that essence is peace. So, if at 70 your memories still bring more gratitude than grievance, understand this deeply. Your heart has learned one of life's highest lessons to remember in a way that heals, not hurts. Section 5. Still feeling useful and needed. At the age of 70, one of the deepest fears people silently carry is not illness or aging, it is irrelevance. The feeling of "I am no longer needed." But I once met a man in a small village in Rajasthan who completely changed my understanding of this. He was 76 years old. Every morning he would sit outside his small home under a neem tree. Villagers would come to him not for money, not for medicine, but for advice, for wisdom, for listening. I asked him, "Why do people still come to you?" He laughed gently and said, "Because I still listen." That simplicity carried profound truth. At 70, usefulness does not always mean physical labor or financial contribution. It often becomes emotional presence, wisdom, and guidance. There was also a grandmother I met in West Bengal who lived with her grandchildren. Every evening, she would tell them stories, not just entertainment stories, but life lessons hidden in folklore. The children waited for her voice more than television. She said, "If I stop sharing, I stop living." That is purpose not in productivity, but in contribution. When a person feels useful, something extraordinary happens inside the body. The energy does not collapse inward, it flows outward. Depression often comes when life feels like it has no direction. But meaning brings movement back into the mind and body. At 70, even small acts of usefulness matter deeply. Teaching a child, blessing someone, sharing advice, praying for others. Even smiling at a stranger can become an act of contribution. I once visited a retired man in Punjab who used to sit outside a school every day. When I asked him why, he said, "Children see me here every day. Even if I do nothing, they know someone cares." That was his way of staying connected to life. The truth is simple. Humans are not designed to feel unnecessary. We thrive when we feel we matter to someone, even in small ways. At 70, if a person still feels someone benefits from my presence, then life continues to feel meaningful. And meaning is what keeps the spirit alive even when the body slows down. So if at 70 you still feel needed even in the smallest form, understand this. Your life has not moved toward the end of usefulness. It has simply transformed its expression. Because being useful is not about what you do. It is about what you still give. And sometimes, the greatest gift at this age is simply your presence itself.